Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our panelists discussing the future is about smart data.
Look at us. Woo.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. All right, welcome to this panel on the topic, The Future is Smart Data. My name is Laura Forgione. I'm VP of Enterprise Solutions at Cint, and I was absolutely thrilled to have the opportunity to moderate this session today. Smart data is a huge, important topic. I know, sort of speaking to a lot of you, leading up to this event, it's very front and center. It's top of mind. We talked about it a little bit yesterday in the State of the Industry section. But I believe, personally, that it's one of the reasons why it's so exciting to be in market research right now. As we've touched on, there are sophisticated ways we can connect data sets together, and this presents an enormous opportunity for our customers. But at the same time, it's complex, it's challenging, it's difficult to navigate, there's a lot of privacy regulations. So today's session is really about understanding that better, exploring it. Hopefully, we're going to bring it to life with some really nice customer use cases. I have three tremendous panelists to do just that. I have questions, but definitely relying on all of you to really help dig in. And I think we really want to understand where have our panelists seen success, but also what they're looking to do in the future. So let's kick it off and introduce our wonderful panelists. John, I'm going to start with you.
Howdy, everybody. When I joined NPD, I became a hermit. So if you've joined the industry in the last 8 years, you have no idea who I am. If you've been around longer than that, you probably do know who I am because I wouldn't shut up at conferences. So I'm currently, for the time being, the Global Chief Research Officer of Circana. And that is actually fresh off the presses. We announced our new rebranding today. That is the combination of NPD and IRI is now Circana. So I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah.
All right, Heather.
Hi, Heather Hughes. I am Innovation Manager for Omnicom Public Relations Group. And I had to remember to say that because it is my second day in this role. Prior to that, I spent 6 years at the wonderful Cint working on the Connected Data Initiative. So super excited to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. And hi, everyone. My name is Dom Wong. I am one of the co-founders and the CEO of a company called Pogo. Just quick background, 30 seconds. At Pogo, our big goal is to help people earn more in their lives by helping them unlock the power of their data. Specifically, we launched a consumer app that's used by over 500,000 families in America, where folks actively sync different live data feeds with us. So it could be purchase data through financial institutions, it could be SKU level UPC data through linking Amazon accounts or email inboxes, it could be linking auto insurance policies, all these things through API-driven connections. And our app basically functions as kind of like Honey meets Credit Karma in some ways for consumers, where we help you find ways to save in your shopping or your big financial decisions. And then the third bucket of value is we also allow you to opt into monetizing your data if you choose, which has a lot of interesting applications, obviously, in this world that we're in here, where, for example, we can allow people to, or brands to survey consumers based on verified purchase data longitudinally, and do all sorts of exciting things in this new ML AI-driven world. So,
Excellent.
Yep.
So as you can hear, we've got such a wonderful cross-section and different diverse perspectives here, which makes for a very interesting discussion today. So let's kick things off. We're going to keep it simple with this first question. Heather, I'm going to direct this at you. So let's define smart data. How does the data get smarter?
My definition for smart data would really be able to access data at a collection point in a way that it's formatted, that you can utilize it right away. And then on top of that, being able to link that data through formatting to other data sets for greater insights.
Yeah.
Great.
I think it's important. It's a term. We call smart data different things, but the idea is, and I think you'll hear more about this later, we've got to actually be smarter, about our data, again. we've got to have data strategies, and it's no longer enough to have data in silos in order to get the best bang for the buck, the actual insights that people are making decisions off of. So it's how do I actually create a data strategy that allows me to access and utilize all this information together?
Yeah, that leads me to my next question, and I think, Seema, you touched on this yesterday. One of the challenges is there is like so much abundance of data. What would your advice be? How do you narrow down the data, and how do you know what data to really focus on?
Yeah, so I think maybe my quick take is sometimes this notion of abundance of data might be a misnomer if you think about like the exact use case that you're looking for. I think in many use cases and industries, like there actually might be not enough data, and in some other cases, when you look at it in a broad sense, like there is too much. So, you know, I think a lot of it's like, how do you make sure that the data you're collecting is actually useful for the business applications that you're trying to drive? In our example for Pogo, like the way we've structured, you know, our data collection panel essentially is like we want to have the deepest understanding on a single given user, right? From, you know, impression to purchase, and that allows us to do certain things. And some other strategies might be more fit for others. So yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, and I think you just hit the nail on the head, really being able to focus on your business goals, because you can say, okay, I can access this data set and this data set, but really is what do you want to do with that data, and really building a strategy based off of that is super important, or it can get very muddy out there with all the different data that you can access.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take it slightly different from a client perspective. I think there is actually too much data at times. And the reason I say that is everyone wants more data, faster, et cetera, et cetera. And there's only so much without help, and I think that gets into building the right data strategy that you can do. You know, you've only got a certain number of hours in the day, and you know, if you get 18 data sets coming at you and you're expected to pull out what the right insights are for you know, your boss or the rest of the folks in the corporation, it can get tough. And so I think there's actually a role, particularly for this group, not only in creating data, but thinking about how the data can be utilized most effectively by your clients. And I think we really have to transform our mindset in what we're actually doing to be successful in the future.
Yeah, and John, can you give us some use cases from your kind of vast experience? Like, what are some of the customer use cases that you're seeing?
So I'll give a very simple use case. So if you want to know your position in the marketplace, you can do that multiple ways. You can look at POS data and use your own information to pull out, you know, how you're doing against the competitors, but you don't necessarily have the competitors. So then you might have survey data over the same thing, but it may not tell the same story. Hopefully it tells a very similar story, but the precise nature of what you're looking for is necessary. So using those two data sets together, you get precision from the POS data, you get sort of a broad view of the marketplace from the survey data, gives you a much better view and much more actionable results. So that's just two data sets. You can add in receipts to that. You can add in other elements. I know you've got some impressive data streams that are going. But if your goal, you know, you got to think about, back to the strategy, what your goal is, what you're trying to do. How do I actually have the data play together to actually get to that goal?
Yeah. Anything to add, Heather or Dom, there?
No, I think, you know, you said it very well. I mean, for me, a use case that I think about is, you know, looking at earned media, so like an influencer campaign or articles, you know, being able to leverage survey data for the brand lift study against other data sets. So one specific use case that Omnicom uses is using social affinity data to create these audiences that have been exposed to content on Instagram, et cetera, to reach out for brand lift studies, which is different than like saying, you know, we're going to put a pixel on this site. It's really leveraging different data sets to gain the access to those insights.
For those that might not be familiar with Stat Social, would you mind just explaining or elaborating a little bit more there? Because that was a really good use case. But
Sure. So Stats Social, they take data from LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and Reddit, a number of others, and then they build data sets based on interactions, affinities. And the great thing about affinity data is no one's making you like Patagonia on Instagram, right? You're making that decision to like that. And then you build cohorts like, okay, people that like Patagonia, they're also more likely to like National Geographic, et cetera. So it really derives some super interesting insights when you marry that data together.
Excellent. Thank you, Heather. So something that you just said, John, kind of brought me to, obviously, quality of data, which I know is a pretty big conversation right now. How and what steps are you taking to ensure quality of data? And I have almost like a follow-up as well, which is like, what's your customer expectation as well when it comes to quality of data?
So I'm going to take your question, answer it, and then go in the direction I really want to go with the
As long as you answer my question first, I'm fine with that.
So, I think we were going to wait till the end to talk about this, but we have multiple types of data. So let's get with POS. It's pretty much census data for what we have. And so when we think about quality there, it's not about the inference type of quality. It's about did they send us the right data? Yes or no? We can figure out that pretty quickly. What's the, are there any sort of tweaking things that we need to actually do to that? Have we coded it in the right way? Are things in the right categories? Stuff like that. For survey data and for receipt data, we started using machine learning AI techniques in order to actually look at the information that's a part of it. And because people take our surveys over time, we actually have the same people. We can actually do a lot with that information. And so when we marry it, we're actually able to look at what does our data say. Now, again, we've got POS data, and we can utilize all the aspects of it, so we know how good our survey data is. We know if it's actually giving us the right answer or not giving us the right answer. We can't completely expose the POS data to clients, so we're using the consumer survey data to actually get us there. So it's actually pretty easy in terms of that. Now, the twist, where I want to go, and people have actually heard me chat about this in this, is I think because of the plethora of data and the really excellent data that's out there, I think survey data still is the best at answering the whys types of questions, but I think the other four sort of fundamental key questions are now better answered by other data sets. So the data that Pogo is collecting answers a lot of various questions, and I'll even throw out there that I think there are some really good models that are, without survey data, getting to a decent part of the whys. So the question really is, how does survey data stay relevant, stay very useful? I don't think it's ever going away. There are certain things that only it can answer. But we were sort of the party in the room with CEOs and C-suites around 2000. We sort of lost that to the IT departments and other places. My answer is twofold, and I will try and make this quick. I'm sorry for prattling on. I'm not really sorry. But it's twofold. One, we've been talking about the quality issue forever. We have to solve the quality issue.
Yes.
We had, again, I'm now a client as opposed to on the supplier side, but we're seeing degradation in the data, and with better techniques for finding bad data, the amount of bad data we're seeing is going up and up on this, and some of it's just purely nonsensical. We've got to solve that. I think we have the tools and we have the information we need to solve that. But in order to stay relevant, for the second part I'm going to talk about, we have to solve that. However, if we solve that, there's a big payoff down the road. Mm-hmm. And it's what we're actually talking about here, which is this information is the way that we can use it to thread other data sets together to provide information that those data sets can't. And so it basically can become the backbone of a data strategy if you trust the data. And we've been talking about this forever. We've got to make some tough choices, and we've got to be really courageous about it in order to move on, because I'm going to publish an article tomorrow, so I'll just say it. We're on the precipice of a second revolution. And either we're going to win the revolution or we're going to lose the revolution. And it's our choice. And there are some not so easy choices that we have to make in order to win the revolution. But I think we can do it. Now I'll shut up for a second.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I had 2.5 minutes time for you there, so I was going to cut you, but you managed to wrap it up.
We have hand signals for you to shut up.
I haven't used it yet. There's still time. All right, Heather and Dom, let's hear from you. Anything to add?
Go ahead first.
Yeah. So no, I think John put it great. Maybe I'll speak to kind of our approach to it too. I think from our perspective, the way to solve the data quality issue is to make sure you're getting it from the source. And our approach is actually, we think the consumer plays a really interesting role here. So our approach at Pogo is to have folks directly sync these live data feeds, whether it's like from your bank account directly or from your Amazon account directly. And I think there's a couple paradigm shifts that we see in the market today. Right. One is from a legal perspective with GDPR and CCPA, you as a consumer actually own your data legally. Two is this explosion of technology in the API world with companies like Plaid building the pipes between your bank account and the app that you trust, right? Those APIs are emerging across every single data source, whether it's banking data, commerce data, healthcare data. You can sync your Apple Watch data with anything, and comes directly from the truth set, right? So if you build an interface that allows the consumer to seamlessly click a button, auth their credentials because they trust you and they're getting value, I think that's been our approach. And I think in this world, right, the second revolution you're talking about, I mean, we live in a world where the IDFA is going away like that. Cookies, we've been talking about that. So the future is about opt-in, and you have to involve the consumer. And I think the technology actually exists today where if you have that consumer permission, you can start pulling all these things. So instead of relying on self-reported data or, maybe like fuzzy matching 30 different data sets, via LiveRamp ID that causes, you lose 50% here and then 50% there. One framework might be to think about it from, okay, well, what if I get it all directly, from the source of truth through these authorizations and these live feeds?
Yeah, and I think in obviously not all cases we can get it directly from the source of truth, but then going back to the consent aspect and making sure that you have explicit consent to utilize PII from the respondents so you can link other data sets for validation. Right. I mean, that's definitely a huge quality initiative, I think, across the board that needs to be employed more and more, especially in sort of more programmatic platforms. And that's really, it's driven by consent.
Thank you.
I did want to point out the amazingness of real-time technology. Katie is actually writing about this on LinkedIn, which I actually got on my watch while we were talking. But that's actually a sort of, not my expectation, but that is sort of the expectation of clients. If something happens, I want to know about it, whether it's with my brand, whether if it's with something else. And technology and different data streams are allowing us to do this. And that's why us sort of having a sort of a transformed mindset is actually very important on this, because the expectations are now different than they ever were before.
Thank you.
Sorry, Katie.
So we've talked about...
I love it.
Love it. We've talked about quality of data. We've talked about why it's important, and we're going to talk about this a bit more, why it's important to have a data strategy. Let's talk a little bit more about data integrity and privacy. Huge topic, changing all the time. We have now even more regulations coming out this year. I believe there's now 5 US state new regulations coming out this year. How to navigate that? How are you kind of setting up or gearing up for that, Heather? How would you approach that?
I mean, first, it's utilizing platforms that do get explicit consent. You have to do it. Yeah. And especially, a lot of data that I deal with is based in Germany and, Sweden, et cetera, where you really have to make sure that you say, we're going to use this data for data matching purposes. And, the opt-in rates definitely flux between the countries, but the more comfortable people get doing that, then the more likely they will be able to opt in. And then relying and making sure that publishers are also doing the same thing. Yeah. I know we've had the hiccup with TCF where there's been some problems, and finding that fine line where you can trust the partners that you're working with for the data as well.
Yeah, I think for first-party data, we're finding our ways around it. Not easily, but we have to change a few things that we're doing, but we're able to find our way around it. I think the bigger issue is coming with third-party data, the data we want to add into our data lakes and that aren't ours. We are finding with the 5 states on privacy and how they've defined privacy, it's creating some issues with Experian. We've always done Experian matches to get a lot of information. Well, we can't get race anymore. That they've interpreted the new laws to say that that's a private thing, and you can do it at sort of a geography level, but you can't do it at an individual household level. Yeah. So it's not a game changer in that sense, but if it continues down that road, I think we have the ability to sort of handle it at a first-party level. We get permission, effectively. That helps us across almost all of these things. Now, there are some other aspects in there, and I think we can deal with them. It's really the third-party aspects that we're counting on to bolster our information that become more complicated.
Yeah, maybe I'll add too. I think one interesting observation as we've been building Pogo is actually like the more transparent you are today, the actually more willing people are to share more. And I think it's a paradigm shift because you think about the history of the internet. All these Web 1.0 companies were built off of let's bury the terms and conditions in this massive text. And I think consumers are now, everyone understands that there's no free lunch, right? And when you're signing up for something that, and I think it's almost like accepted these days. So I think what we found is actually within the Pogo app, for example, one of the first screens is, hey, do you want to opt into monetizing your data as well? And within that, you can actually choose like, hey, for anonymized market research, toggle on and off, or for more personalized ads. And I think, a large majority of users actively choose to opt in, and I think a lot of it's based on that sort of transparency and trust. Obviously, also the value exchange that you're providing. But I do think that there is an opportunity for companies to not be afraid of burying things and actually leaning into the fact that, hey, this is what's going to happen. And I think consumers are actually pretty smart about it today and are much more receptive than folks might think.
And I think too, you're as an audience owner, as a panel owner, I think we also need to work with other panel owners to say, hey, not only is this about quality, it's also, you'll have better, monetization of your audience if you opt into these activities and really, going out to the different people and discussing that as well.
All right, I'm just looking at the clock. I would love to give the audience an opportunity. We're at the halfway mark. Are there any questions from the audience? If not, I can move on, but just wanted to allow the opportunity. No.
Hey.
Why a bunch? Don't be shy.
We are so clear.
Todd, I knew you'd help me out.
Everybody hear me? Do I need the mic?
Just shout.
No, just shout, you're good.
Okay. I'm very curious in terms of data structure. You said your data strategy. What are some of the challenges that you guys face in terms of combining different behavior data sets within that strategy to make it actionable for clients when really you don't know all the use cases, maybe because your client base is so diversified or changing constantly given market conditions? That's the first part. And then the second part of that is how do your clients or your stakeholders ingest a lot of that data? Is that more through visualization through platforms, and in which case feeds into the earlier part of the question in terms of how do you account for that and those challenges, knowing that they change? Because a lot of the times decision makers within brands aren't going to look at anything outside of top KPIs, right? So how do you bring that data to life through that to make it really actionable?
Okay.
You want to kick it off? Yeah.
So my answer is we're going to talk about that in the second half. However, one of the things that we might as well bring it forward since we're just moving through the conversation. The importance of a data strategy is so that you can understand the data architecture that you actually need to build.
Yeah.
You're not going to get it perfect, but if you don't have it, you're going to get it really, really wrong. And so we have multiple different data types, and they're actually at different levels. So in other words, we have some at the brand level, we have some at the SKU level, we have We have individual level data, respondent level data. We have company level data. And so how do you actually bring all that together? Well, if you, it ends up becoming a relatively sparse matrix, but if you build your data architecture appropriately, you can take all of that into account, because when you're getting to reporting the data, which is effectively the second element of it, you can collapse the structure and get to it in the way that you need it. So I think that goes back to the question of why do you need a data strategy? I would argue there's another reason you do, but it really informs how you actually create the data architecture. Now, there will be cases you haven't thought of, to be brutally honest. And so there are elements in data architecture where you can actually allow for some flexibility, but sometimes you may just need to link one data architecture to a different data architecture and figure out that linkage. Now, your second part of your question, if I remember correctly, is how do clients ingest this? Well, they can ingest it in a variety of different ways, and I think there are different tools out there, either created by yourselves, so we've created our own tools, or there's stuff off the shelf which allow you to look at the data in multiple different ways. So if you really just want visualization, it can actually create visualizations off of the data. And a lot of it is plug and play these days. If we have tons of clients who actually ingest the actual data itself, and you can download the actual data at the level you need it, at the granularity. They don't want the big data sets, and it's an entirety, the whole dump of the data architecture. We charge them a lot of money for that too, if they really wanted that. But there's a flexibility in tools these days that you can't, and if you've got the right data architecture, you can get at the right data in the right way. I don't want to oversimplify it, but pretty easily, I think.
Yeah, and I would say if you have the right identity graph where you have a static kind of ID that you can link different types of PII, whether that be mobile ad IDs, whether that be name and address if you have that, whether, cookie IDs, trade desk IDs. If you have those match keys, then you're really agnostic, right? You can link any data set to, to that ID and then get the data you need for that specific client. And like you were saying, some clients want all the data, they want the raw data, and you can definitely charge more for that and deliver it in like an S3 bucket.
And it always turns out they don't really want
it,
that.
And they're like, what do we do with this? Yeah, exactly. But, or, you have data visualization tools, whether they be proprietary or something like Tableau, that you can map and sort of segment that data out.
Yeah, I think Heather's absolutely right there, where I think the key is like, how do you tie it back to a single identifier? A specific profile, and then once you structure the data so that you're getting, for example, it could be like web impression data, purchase data, yada, yada, tied to that profile, the data manipulations get much simpler. And I would actually say with the rate of change that we're seeing in machine learning AI tools, maybe a new way to think about it is actually, if you actually are able to have this all formatted nicely, you can, for the first time, like plug all that data in and surface interesting insights. So I'll give you an example. I think like in the past, let's say you were to do a customer segmentation, right? You might engage a firm that might go out there and hypothesize, like, here are what I think might be the key characteristics of, a buyer of M&Ms, right? You might run a survey, and then you go and, crunch the pivot tables to understand, hey, what are the things that they index higher on or lower? I think the new paradigm is probably actually, there are probably a lot of things that you and I probably will never think about that are pretty heavy predictors. So if you can get the live feed of data, literally you have this data asset that has millions of columns essentially, right, for an individual. You pump it through these machine learning tools, and then it'll actually spit out, okay, here are like the top 10 predictive characteristics of a, Amazon M&M's buyer. And not only that, like here's how they weight across the board so you can actually understand relative importance. And I think what we've seen when we've done that is like, suddenly, you don't have to rely on clients asking or trying to hypothesize. It's more like, hey, these are actually things that you never knew. And I think it's only made possible because of the advancements today.
I do want to actually, though, push back just a little bit, not too much, only because machine learning AI is very powerful. The problem we're going to run into, and it's a problem we really have to address, is who owns data, particularly if it goes into a learning model. And if the learning model is accessible to others, do you still own, if it's part of a learning model, do you still own the data or not? Because if it's using that information and I can query and bring other information to the party, is it the tool or is it because they had access to another set of data? So data ownership and data rights, I think, are going to start to become a really, really big thing. It obviously is already, but particularly, I, for one, welcome our robot overlords, but we do need to actually be thoughtful about how we're actually utilizing it and what forms and what functions we're actually utilizing it, because it may actually cannibalize our business at some level. And this is actually a big discussion that's happening in the boardrooms right now, is how much to allow our clients even to apply techniques to the data.
Did that answer your question, Todd?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Thanks. Please.
John, can you explain a little bit more about the learning model? I'm not sure I followed that.
Yeah, so a lot of ML/AI models, tools, are based off of learning models. So, they aren't sentient beings. They actually have to figure out and come up with a huge set of information that allows them to go out and then either create new information or bring up other information. And so you have what's called, it's either training set or learning set. And it's a huge set of data. I mean, it's just huge. And it depends on what it's trying to do as to what the format of that data is. Once it goes into the training set, the question is, it's not going in, it's not a set that's an output per se, but if it's now training the model, you can basically generate the same insights that's in that data set, even though you're not directly pinging that data set. Yeah. And so there's a proprietary nature of data, which is, our POS data, first of all, our clients, our retailers, won't allow us to expose their data, and there's actually some regulatory reasons we can't. If by some chance, and some of our clients have access to various snips of it, if they're actually utilizing it in a way that it goes into various training sets, is that data out there? Can someone figure out what Walmart sales were in the fifth week of December? Things of that nature. So we're obviously all in on machine learning AI, but it's bringing up new issues. Not that data rights haven't been an issue before, but they're now an issue in a different way than we've ever thought about. And it's ChatGPT is probably not the model that it's going into, but its sort of big splash really did sort of have people start to think about what's happening. And I would argue ChatGPT is not great at a variety of things, but it's not long until it is at this point. So you have to be thinking about these strategies as part of your data strategy as we move forward.
Right, we're at the 10-minute mark. Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, at the back, please.
Hi, lovely talk today. I was just wondering, so have you guys experimented with using autoencoders, for example, to create these synthetic data sets?
Sorry, we're just going to grab you a mic, if that's okay.
That would probably help, wouldn't it?
There we go.
So what I was asking is, have you guys experimented with using autoencoders, these other self-trained neural nets, to create, essentially synthetic data sets that anonymize the source but allow you to keep the statistical representations? Has that been valuable to your end users still, or do you lose too much texture of the data?
For me, I have not created sort of purely synthetic data models. What I have done is utilize surveys to build seed audiences, and then push them into a DMP or a partner for them to model that out, so it becomes a stronger model to use.
So the answer is yes, but basically we're doing it to see if we can figure out our own data, to see if others can. And even though it's anonymized, you can still, if you're smart, and these people in the room are smart, you can figure things out. So it's still not It's still not there. And again, anything that I'm saying is not there. We're making such strides on things that maybe next week it is. But yeah, right now our main concern is really, we would love to do that for a variety of different reasons. We still haven't found that we can.
Any other questions? One thing that we haven't, so we've talked about quality of data. We've talked to Todd's point about how can we make the data actionable. You've got the wonderful, great data, it's high quality. How do you know how to manage that? How long is it fresh and relevant for? Like, Heather, just kick this to you. I'd love to hear from all of you, but how do you handle that? How do you know how long to hold the data for, to store the data for, to refresh the data?
I mean, for me, in working with different data sets, I would say at least update the data quarterly. You don't want to hold any data longer than 12 months for sure, but to have a regular cadence when you're updating that data, of course, more frequently is better, but at minimum, at least quarterly, to make sure that you have actionable data. And also in that process, again, checking to make sure those opt-ins are there, re-asking respondents those same questions to leverage that data.
John, anything to add, or Dom there? I mean, Dom, from your perspective, I know it's, very different, right? You're getting real-time, actionable data every day, but I'm just curious if you had anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think the closer real time, the more interesting use cases you can probably power. Like, for example, if you want to optimize the audience, ad audience live, then if you can pump the conversions that are coming in real time to do that, that drives, much higher performance. So I think the real-time stuff definitely helps with enabling a bunch of use cases, and I think we all probably want as close to real time as we can, and I think it is very possible with a lot of the feeds. I mean, we get purchase data multiple times an hour, when they come in. So from those feeds. So I think that's one. And then your second question was around. I'll get back to it.
Oh, just talk about what you want. That's what I mean. So
John, I know you'll chime in.
We keep data for a long time. So we're getting data. So for POS, we're getting some daily feeds. For surveys, where we're still doing surveys, we do it on a monthly cadence. Well, actually, some are just continuous, but we process on a monthly cadence. For receipts, it's continuous. But we're doing that for a different reason. It's because our clients want to know where are they today versus where were they in the past. And so we've got to keep the past in order to make sure that they understand that. Now, I will tell you, COVID sort of changed things because clients really didn't care where they were in 2020. So it used to be, I'm going to compare this year to last year. They didn't want to compare to 2020. And so we had this big debate. Do we now do year over 2 years? Do we just actually keep? But it actually freed us up to change some of our systems just because the clients really didn't want to know how they compared to the COVID period just because it was so different. It doesn't help them manage their business in this day and age.
Yeah. All right, so we have 5 minutes left. I'm looking into the audience. Please raise your hands if Seema. Biggest challenge?
Everything?
Scale, privacy laws, there's a bunch of things.
I think the answer is everything. So again, all we talk about is, so we have a real issue that if we have exposure in our data, then if a Walmart pulls out, for example, we have a problem. If an Amazon pulls out because we've exposed their data, we have a problem. So if I had to pick one, it's some form of exposure of the information. And that's why MLAI is a big issue for us that we're thinking about is we can't have it get out into the universe where they actually figure out, where they expose the information. It's our business at that point.
Yeah, I mean, ever-changing privacy laws, staying up to date, on those. I would say also, going back to my identity graph kind of statement, having enough opted-in PII, to be able to leverage across the board.
Yep.
And then, of course, any kind of data breach is always a big worry.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be increasingly greater responsibility. It's been something that we have to be very aware of, where, when you get a live data feed, I mean, that's a lot of data, right? And how do you ensure that you are protecting it in the right way for the consumer? And yeah, I think it's a new world. I mean, like once, I think a lot of it's like, how do you educate the consumer and ensure that like what you're offering them is what they understand as well? Because yeah, I think that use cases will be quite endless as we keep going and going. And I think a lot of it is probably on the responsibility of the, companies up here and the technology companies to like figure out how do we do this in an ethical way as well. That, but I think it's like any platform shift, right? I think you saw all the things that Facebook had to deal with. I think it's going to be pretty similar for any sort of other data feed that folks are connecting.
So tying things back, I have one last question for you before this panel's a wrap, unfortunately, although I think we could have had another 45 minutes. It's been great. Tying things back, when we think about the future of data, I'm going to ask all of you this question. What do you want to leave the audience with?
Revolution. I say that in the sense that we have such an opportunity now. We are going to get back to being the key players in the C-suite. If we choose not to take that opportunity, it is going to lead to irrelevance. There's so much amazing data out there that if we're not leading how the information is utilized and the information is put together, I don't think the survey industry is ever going to die. I think there's always a case for it, but budgets are tight, and where am I going to put my extra dollar is the question, and we need to be at the front of mind when people are asking that question.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, survey insights, just the survey itself is great, but companies want more. They want to see more. They want more insights that can be derived from connecting data sets, as well as, I think, again, touching back on the quality issues, this can help solve a lot of those. So you're really connecting this person I saw buy a Geico insurance, policy. We know it's not a ghost complete. So I think between those two things, I think that is what you should think about.
Yeah, and I think in the market research world, my observation from being more of an outsider is like, I think there's a big opportunity to remove the burden from the consumer and make it very seamless for them with this new technology. So instead of self-reports, can we get a single linkage that gets all this data already, so that we don't have to ask 20 screener questions, right? And that makes the whole experience better for everyone, because brands get better responses and more data. And I think there's like a real win-win if you can think about, how do we leverage modern technology to create a better experience for both consumers and brands.
Yep.
And I did briefly want to call out Scott Porter, who I can't actually see where he's back there. He's built some of the amazing tools that have allowed us to better understand suboptimal behavior in our surveys, and it's helped a lot.
Excellent, thank you. So yeah, wonderful session. Big thank you to John, Heather, and Dom. I've certainly learned a lot. As I say, I personally believe this is one of the reasons why it's so exciting to be in market research right now. Challenge, huge opportunity. But thank you very much.
Woo-hoo. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.